My name is Brock, and this is the Dungeon Master's Toolkit Podcast.
On today's episode, I talked to Justin from the Black Dragon Dungeon Company, which is a actual play podcast. Justin also has a bunch of other projects, so go ahead and check him out. I will leave his links in the description. On the episode, we cover a bunch of topics, but some of the main ones that come up are rewarding your players' creativity and giving your players what they want. If you're interested in helping out the show, don't forget to like, comment, and share the episodes. Contact me if you or a DM you know would like to be on the show. Use any of the affiliate links in the show notes, or support me over on Patreon or buy me a coffee. And with that, let's jump into the episode. Welcome, everybody. Today I have Justin with me. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you on. Justin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the tabletop role-playing space?
For sure. Yeah, my name is Justin. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for the last 3 years. I've also expanded my list of TTRPGs to like Alice is Missing, Deadlands, Call of Cthulhu, as well as a couple other indie games that are out there, like the Roaring Twenties, which is a cow trip core game. And I've been doing this, like I said, for about 3 years. And I picked this hobby up as just kind of like as a thing to pass time. I was in Iraq at the time, and I had seen a couple of my coworkers that were playing D&D, and I asked if I can sit down and watch. And then next thing I know, I'm drawing up a character, and I haven't stopped playing since. So as of this year, I've been doing a lot more playing than I have been DMing. And yeah, I've just been getting more and more into the TTRPG community, which has been a blast meeting and talking with everybody. So yeah, it's a little bit of my story.
It's definitely a rabbit hole. Once you kind of get into it, you can get sucked in pretty far. What was the first system that you played?
That would definitely be Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. What is it? We were the campaign that I joined in was finishing up, or at least in a way finishing up, Dungeons of the Mad Mage, turning into Dragon Heist, and then it did a little bit of Acquisitions Incorporated before I left Iraq and came back to the States.
And what was your transition to becoming a dungeon master?
Very, very abrupt. I got, you play D&D for a little bit, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that gets like that itch when you stop, and it's like I want to play, but you don't have many people around that that are interested in doing that. So I mean, me being who I am, like I want to play, and being the DM fills that role of being able to like tell the story and being able to play, with my friends. So I'm watching a bunch of YouTube videos, doing a lot of reading, before I settled on doing Curse of Strahd with my wife, because we did have a little bit of a bad experience getting her into Dungeons and Dragons with a group. So I was like, no, it's actually a fun game. Let me run it, and let me, show you what I believe it's capable of being. And then my group just kind of jumped from there, started with my wife to friends from work, and well, now I'm doing this. So
And when you started running for your wife, was it just the two of you? So you running and her playing?
yeah, I did like I did a session 1 with her, and it was interesting, as like me and her were walking through how to play the game, as well as going through like a rough scenario from the Curse of Strahd module, and then talking with some friends from work who were also interested, some of whom that I played when I was in Iraq with. You know, they were like, "Hey, can we play as well? Can we join you all?" So I talked with her, and she was just like, "Yeah." And you know what? We won't even count that first session. It won't be. It just her introduction, and then like we'll just start with everybody as a group, and then it just went from there.
And has she been enjoying it then?
Yeah. We've as a me and her, and our group have been playing nonstop for almost 3 years now. And I've done a little bit to like, hey, have you ever thought about DMing? And for her, she kind of sees it as like homework, and she's like, nah, I'd rather just do the playing. You and then the others, they can run the game, but I'll play it. I'm like, I totally understand that. That's respectable, and I'm just happy to be able to do something, twice a week, 6 hours total, where it's me and her. Either I'm on the DM seat or I'm a player right next to her, having fun, spending time together.
It's a lot better than the alternative of just having that time where you're not getting to spend it with your wife.
Exactly.
That's kind of how me and my wife are. Um, we are players in 2 games right now that are kind of like monthly-ish.
Okay.
But it's nice that it's like, okay, it's D&D night, and it's not okay, I'm gonna go play D&D and she's gonna go, do whatever else. It's like we both get to enjoy it together, with some friends. So that's always it's always nice to be able to share those interests and those hobbies.
Exactly. 100%.
How do you typically do prep for your sessions?
So prep's interesting, because it depends on a couple things for me. One, whatever module I'm running, because I lean to a certain extent heavily on modules. Maybe that's not the right way of phrasing it, but I use modules, and I use that as a skeleton for everything that I'm doing. And so depending on what my players are doing, it could be just like I'm going through and like reading the module like maybe an hour beforehand and seeing what the players should encounter, not necessarily the what the module says they're going to do, but more like, okay, well, this character may appear, and so this is what they may look to do, and just kind of run with that. And then if there's maps or anything involved with that, I'll pull whatever I can from like the module itself, from like D&D Beyond, or what I can find online, and put it into like Owlbear Rodeo, so that way they can have that visual there to be able to see it. And sometimes, but what we used to do before is like I just open up the screen, because we use Google Meets, and just be like, hey, where do you guys look to go on the screen? And I like just move them around, and like they tell me where they want to go. Luckily, we found Owlbear, so they get to do it now, as opposed to just telling me where they want to go. And then like I'll just pretty much just go based off of how the last session went. So if we're slowly going through a specific area, then like I'll just continue on with like what I already have prepared, and just go with the narrative that the players have set forth. And if I'm doing like a one shot, if I'm doing like a something special for like a charity event or something, for a grander audience, I'll definitely take a lot more time to
To look a little bit nicer, right?
yeah. There's only so many times I can go off a post note that says "sexy goblin?" question mark.
I feel like there's a story behind that.
I wish there was a story behind it. I've only been using that as like a meme of sorts, and I can't even remember where exactly I've seen that before. Where I want to say it was like a cartoon of sorts, where someone was just like, "Wow, you must have all this stuff prepared." Like, I'm going to plan for whatever magic items my players want to take, and even if it may seem OP, like unless it's like really like something that I'm like it causes me to like think is like to like take a couple moments to consider, I'll work with them to maybe like find something else, or maybe bring the level down a little bit. But for the most part, like chaos reigns supreme, and I'm here for it. I've given my players wish scrolls and the deck of many things just to see what they've thrown at me, and I have to say, like, it's been a blast every time.
Do those ever come back to bite the players with
uh,
their asking?
The deck of many things has not yet. They've only drawn a quote unquote bad card, which was the knight card. And it wasn't necessarily them. It was one of the prisoners that they went to interrogate, and they gave it to the prisoner. They were like, "Hey, do you you need to say this, and you can draw this card." And they were, I don't know exactly their thought process, but I guess they were hoping something bad like the void would pop in and they'd go bye bye. but it turned out they drew the knight card, and so they ended up like two of the players were there, everybody else was gone to like they essentially split the party, and the two players that were there had to fight the knight by themselves while also doing their best that they can to keep the prisoner there. And so that was a fiasco in and of itself. So I want to say that was the closest it came to biting them back. And that wish spell they've used and essentially caused me to throw Rise of Tiamat out the window.
Just completely change the trajectory of the campaign, right?
Absolutely. Like I was hoping that they were going I was hoping that they were going to wish for something that I could mess around with to an extent, but when they wished for all of the dragon masks to be at their location, they were very specific with their language that I'm just like I sat there for a little bit, I'm like I don't know what to do right now and I don't see any holes that I can dig into, so I gave it to them. And I'm like, okay, you guys now have this. As I'm chucking the book out the window, and I hear a cat meow as I think I may have hit it. Jokingly, I say that. And yeah, no. But it did, in a way, come back to bite them, as I told them, like, okay, you guys did this. And so I had like the villains come there, and they're like, how the hell did they find us? Well, you guys did a couple different things that, if we were to take a look at it and from a magical perspective, would cause the city that you get, or the town that you guys are in, to like almost look like red with all magical, radiation of sorts, and compared to everything else. So you guys are going to stand out more than what I think you guys even thought that you guys might stand out to.
I mean, that's a decent consequence for having no other way to really deal with this situation in terms of like consequences, just making it apparent that there's this massive amount of magical energy, all of a sudden in this place.
Exactly.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then on top of that, they also waited, and they did some downtime activities which lasted about a month and a half. So in addition to the wish spell and a couple of other things that they did magically that caused the radiation to show within the area, they also gave the enemy time to be able to go scouting and looking for them. So yeah, it worked out.
Well, if you're just gonna sit there for a couple months, then yeah, that makes a little bit of sense.
Exactly.
So how does this conversation look with your players? Do you say, hey, what kind of items and stuff are you wanting to get over the course of the campaign, or what does that process look like for them, kind of making requests and then like your timeline to fulfill those in the game?
During times where they go into the city and they mention like, hey, can we go shopping for stuff? I'll give them a little bit of a cap. Like I'll tell them like, hey, no, you can find whatever you want as long as it doesn't go beyond uncommon. And like if they were to go into Waterdeep, I put that cap on there so they'd find stuff, and I'm like, keep it to like one or two magical items, something along those lines. And they're really respectful when it comes to it. But if it's something like, if they have like an idea that they have, they'll come to me and they're like, hey, so this is the concept that I have, and I will ask them like, have you made this yet, or do you want me to make this? Because I can see where you're going with this, and I think I can make this happen. And so far, every time they've asked for a magic item to be made for them, they've loved it. And I'll ask them like, what is your feedback on this? Can I make this better for you guys? Or, is there any way? And I've had it a couple times where like, I think it may be a little bit too overpowered. So they'll ask me to like crank things down a little bit, surprisingly. And so, yeah, I'll fulfill it as best I can. Like you just have to ask me and I'm more than happy to fulfill it.
So that's actually really nice that you're getting feedback even with oh, hey, this might be too strong. Maybe we should tone it back a little bit. And I feel like it sounds like the conversation that you and your players have is a very healthy conversation to be like the players aren't trying to take advantage of you giving stuff out, and then in return you're also more willing to give them the things that they want for the game.
Oh, absolutely. And it takes because like I said, we've been doing this for about 3 years, so we have that level of trust amongst each other that like I know that they're not going to push for anything that may be too too overpowered, or they'll have that we'll have that conversation either in private or in like for all of us to kind of talk about together. So trust is really a big thing when it comes to something like that. I know I may be a little bit too trusting even when it comes to like people that I've never I hate to say strangers, but you know new players that I've never had before. Like I'd be open to it, but I think I'd be a little bit more, like let's have this conversation, like why you may want something, and as long as it's a valid, hey, I want it because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, okay, cool. I can buy into that and just roll with it. But like I said, that may also be a thing for me. It's just like I assume the good in people. So when I get asked for certain things, I'm just okay, cool. You probably want it for something good, and I'm here with it.
You said that you've been doing or that you've been playing with your current group for about 3 years. Is that uh, the span of one single, like long-term campaign, or have you guys done multiple campaigns in that 3 years?
We have done. We are currently on our third campaign with me running it. We've done Curse of Strahd, a Descent into Avernus, and now we're in Tyranny of Dragons. And this is all interconnected with each other. This is the what is it? Each of the campaigns are make references to each other, so they're all within the same world. Everything that happened in one campaign can be referenced in another campaign that have effects in this current campaign. So it's very interesting. And then on top of that, one of my players who was my first DM, he had asked me if he can start running a game as well. So like we've been alternating where he'll do one on one day and I'll do our campaign on the other day. So grand total for the group, we've done 5 campaigns together.
Wow, that's a good run, especially to just be continuing to play that long. I assume that each of the campaigns it's new characters, but it's still in the same world.
I have my world and he has his. So we don't necessarily meet anywhere. It's just, his characters are the characters in his world are there and the characters in my world are there. And we just it's kind of like an unspoken like, we just it's I don't really know how to put it other than like he's running his world and I'm running mine. So
And what level do you guys typically get up to by the end of a campaign?
I want to say we've gone up to 13, is the highest, and I'm trying to work it with character backstory as well as stuff from the Tyranny of Dragons module to try and push and see if we can't get the campaign that I'm running to be to have them conclude at level 20.
Do you find as you're getting into those higher levels, are there issues as a DM in terms of like coming up with encounters and stuff like that, or is that just kind of where the narrative kind of finale of the campaigns tend to land?
I think it's for why we've stopped at like level 13, level 14 is mostly due to narrative. And for me, with wanting to push up to 20, narratively speaking, I hold off with the final encounter with Tiamat till then. Um, and as far as like with encounters, it does become a little tricky because I can't just throw, I can't just throw random creatures at them because it wouldn't make sense narratively. So I have to be a lot more, I have to use a lot more a lot more tactics when it comes to fighting, to fighting my players as they go higher, because even as far as I can see, even with some like the lower creatures that they face, you have numbers, odds, and yeah, you have numbers on your side, and you have like smart tactics. Could even still bring down characters of that high of magic. If that makes sense.
Yeah, just a group that works together well, especially the higher level they get, they can punch above their weight limit essentially if they're smart about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes also as a DM, maybe you find this to be true. Um, it can be hard to compete with having, 4 or 5 other brains at the table when you're trying to run all of the monsters, and then, in my experience, um, players can come up with better and faster plans than you can as the DM.
Oh, absolutely. Because just like you had mentioned, like that's 4 or 5 brains more than my one. So, I can come up with the best tactics that I want, but at the end of the day, I may make one move, but you have all these other players that are going before probably like one of my minions are against them, and then boom, next thing you know, like all of my plans just got shattered because them working as a group caused a shift that I wasn't anticipating, and then they see something I don't, and then all those plans just gone.
Do your players tend to find creative solutions to encounters?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Uh there have been, I'd say one of the most interesting ones happens to deal with mayonnaise.
Oh, I would like to hear about this.
So in my Tyranny of Dragons campaign, having the Red Wizards of Thay on top of the Cult of the Dragon on the Skyreach Castle, essentially holding the city of the village of Greenest hostage, because that's where all of the magical energy had been focused on. They managed to be able to get onto the castle, find where the wizards were at, take them down. And I had one character, one of my friends, Jenna. She has a character, a satyr barbarian, that decided she was going to use mayonnaise to put on her hooves to help boost up her speed, and essentially drop kick one of the wizards off of the was drop kick no tackle one of the wizards off of the castle, and then drop kick them even further, so that way they went all the way to the ground. And the way she had described it, I was just like, that is the most unique thing I've ever heard, and I'm going to reward that with you, and I'm going to give you advantage when you do this, because I would have never thought to use mayonnaise in that circumstance.
It sounds like some really off the wall like anime scene.
It really was. It really was. Just when she said that, she described tackling him, and then when it came back to their turn, she talked about how like she made the attack roll and everything, how she just kicked him all the way off, and then was rescued by one of the other PCs, who was on a broom, to keep her from falling off. He did it reluctantly, his character anyway, but it was just an epic scene to just describe and to see play out. Because again, I would have never have thought to use, because she asked for an alchemy jar of all things. I'm like, yeah, it's probably something silly. Okay, well, she used it to increase her speed, and I'm like, let's go, let's do it.
So your campaigns tend to lean on the, like you said earlier, kind of the chaos, embrace the chaos.
Yes, absolutely. Chaos is just more fun because I know that some DMs out there like run their games a lot more serious, and but for my personality and for the my players, chaos is just like our go-to for everything.
And if that's what works for your table, then that's great. It sounds like the stories that come out of it are just fun.
Yeah.
Are there things as a GM that you specifically struggle with?
I think description is like one of the bigger things that I have an issue with. Just because I think that I'm describing everything that that the players are seeing. But then they ask for follow-on questions like, "Ooh, maybe I didn't actually like throw everything out there." And I have this thought of it's supposed to look like flavor text that you would see in like Curse of Strahd or in the modules. And so like in my head, like I'm trying to get to that level, and I'm thinking I'm slowly getting better at it. I'm trying to be as descriptive as I can when it comes to not only player actions but descriptions of the room. And then sometimes they just go into places where I'm like I have to think on my feet, and I don't. My improv game may not truly be all that well to get to be able to like just describe a room off the top of my head. Sometimes I have to write things down just to make sure, like, okay, I want this room to look, a certain way.
Yeah, it's one of the areas that I have a hard time with too. If I don't have I need like bullet points of like here are a couple of things that they'll notice, or like smells, or different sensory things that they'll notice in an
Hmm.
area. I do find it hard to improv some of that stuff if I'm not well prepared for it.
Yeah, and I know that was it. Watching one of the Dungeon Dudes videos, and I want to say it was them that described like not just like the visual aspect of the room, but or just in any sort of like new area for the players to try and do your best to incorporate essentially all of the senses. So, it again, this is something I do think I struggle with to a certain extent. There's always room for improvement, so like that's what I sometimes need to remind myself, like, think of the five senses, think of the five senses. Well, then and then just go into descriptions, try and hit as many of them that seem appropriate.
Right, and trying to hit different ones each time is helpful too. If it's something they hear or if it's something they smell, those can be good descriptors that you don't always think about, especially because if you're trying to describe a scene. I mean, I think as humans we tend to rely on our sight for most things, and it's all of those other senses which are kind of like afterthoughts, which they help us, but they're not like immediate to like recognizing what's around us.
Oh yeah. And then sometimes, and like I said, using maps and stuff. It at least for me, it's easy to forget to have that description on there, unless like I have something already pre-written, or if it's from a module that I can look up and pull through. Sometimes like, okay, you guys go into this room. You see a couple different things, and then just completely leave it at that. And then like I'm like, they'll ask further on questions for it. I'm just like, oh, I should have done a better job at like describing this room instead of just, hey, you guys moved your icons into this room. But I think that that's a pitfall for me. Just here's the room, you guys go in it. What do you guys do?
Do you have advice for new dungeon masters?
The biggest thing that I can tell a new dungeon master is to just do it. I hate to go Shia LaBeouf, but literally it's just, yeah, just to go and do it. There are plenty of resources and videos out there that can explain, different aspects and different rules when it comes to being, running a game, whatever TTRPG you're wanting to do. But it doesn't beat experience. It doesn't beat going out and actually running whatever game that you're looking to do. It doesn't have to be perfect, and I think especially for me, thinking that it has to be perfect, you have to have everything laid out. As long as you have a rough outline of what the story that you and your players want to do, then let them fill in the rest. Like I said earlier on in our conversation, that I see campaigns, and this can go for just stories in general. You have your skeleton, and then you have the meat of everything else in the skin, and allow for your players and all the decisions that they make to be that the meat of everything in there, and just having whatever outline or how you want the story to what the story you want to tell be that skeleton. You can't account for everything that a player will want to do, because they will do some off the wall stuff you would never have thought of in a million years. And if you keep that in mind, just beginning, middle, end, and then just let them fill out the rest.
Yeah, and sometimes the things that they do will involve mayonnaise.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I always agree with the just run it, because your first time's probably going to be bad, or it's going to feel weird or might feel bad when you kind of look back on it. But it gets a lot easier the more you've done it, and that's really one of the main ways to get better at it. And then I also agree with your kind of the skeleton, like to have a general idea of what either needs to happen or what kind of underlying story is going to be, and then let them connect the dots on how they get through a lot of it, because they're gonna, if you get too stuck in this is the specific path that they need to take in order for everything to work out, they're definitely going to take a hard left turn and be nowhere near what you what you had intended. So
Exactly.
know up front that that's probably going to happen, and then just be prepared to have to corral them in some way, or just let it go off the rails too. That's good as well.
Yeah. All that is okay. I think sometimes people brand new DMs and even sometimes veterans just kind of forget that, players are going to do what players do, and that is the unexpected. And sometimes you just got to let the story go the way that they want to, or, find a way to corral them back into it. And sometimes if you take the risk of following where the players want to go, you would be surprised at the amazing story that you'll get from it, and think, okay, well, that is probably way better than what I had initially planned. That's always what I like. That's what I like to keep in the back of my head when it comes to this. Just go out and let's see what the players have in store.
Players have a really fun habit of saying things that are like, "Oh, this is probably the case," or starting little rumors with each other, and then as a DM, you're like, "Okay, write that down. Write that down. We'll use that later."
Yes, dear God, yes. Especially when it comes to like them trying to figure out who the bad guy is and all this. And like I said, I don't necessarily plan for it. I read the module as much as I can, but it's generally like within like the hour, or even sometimes during the session, where I'm like quickly skimming through the module, and it's just like, yeah, that's hold on, ignore me. I'm not doing anything, as I'm like you had said, just writing down whatever that's a good idea. That's phenomenal. That's good stuff. Let's keep that up. I'll remind them that for later. Yeah.
When you're using the modules, it sounds like you kind of use them more as just a guide, right? Like you have a general idea of where the module is supposed to go and maybe key NPCs and stuff like that, but it sounds like you more so just kind of throw them into the module and then just kind of see where they go.
Yeah. So when I first started, I thought that because when I first started running Curse of Strahd, I was trying to go by the book as best as I can, while also trying to understand and conceptualize in my head, where do I, add these checks? When am I supposed to add these checks? They give me sometimes, in the module when I should do it, and then, I thought it needed to be ran in such a manner to where it's supposed to be almost verbatim off the module. But then when I moved to the descent into Avernus, um, I learned quickly that I have to rely on my own imagination to be able to tell a better story, because Descent into Avernus is not a bad story, and it definitely has its great points. But there was, in my opinion, there was a lot that I felt that I needed to provide more input on, and to put it more character focused, rather versus doing more of what the module is telling me to do. And that's part of the experience with being a dungeon master or being a game master, is that you learn how to pick and choose what you need from modules, or from different parts of different elements of literature, and what have you, and to incorporate into your game. And it is until like this latest campaign where I'm using less elements of Tyranny of Dragons and more of the player's input into things, while also throwing in little bits here and there of what I think would help make this a better story than what I already have, in the module itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not pulling it word for word as much anymore. It's more informed by the players, but then still leaning on the module just for the inspiration.
Yeah.
So your group, is primarily playing 5th edition, correct?
That's correct.
But you did mention that you have played some other tabletop games. Do you want to talk about any of those that you've played?
Yeah, so I've played and I'm currently running a Call of Cthulhu campaign right now. Not with the group that I've been talking about. This is with a different group of friends that I've been playing D&D with off and on for a little bit. Not as long, but it's a group that is made up from one of my other friends. And we just started. They were interested in the 1920s setting of Call of Cthulhu after we had played the indie game, the Roaring Twenties. So we managed to convert their characters from that game to Call of Cthulhu. And I've started doing that. I'm also learning how to run Call of Cthulhu as well. So it's been an interesting journey for all of us as the players are learning how to play, and then I'm learning how to run it. So I've relied a little bit on just remembering that the rules are guidelines. So sometimes I'll have them do things, or I won't follow how things are supposed to be done per the GM's handbook for Call of Cthulhu, and just go it off my own gut based on of like the circumstance that we're in. I did play Deadlands for a one shot, and that was incredibly difficult to do for myself, just because it seemed like I had to go to not only the Deadlands rule book, but I also go to Savage Lands, and then I didn't really understand character creation very well. So me and the group that I ran that for, we did a little searching here and there to figure out like the best and most optimized way of being able to develop characters, so that way we can get the session started, and that way they are able to have fun. And then yeah, I did play the game Alice is Missing with Amber from the Space Jamber, Chrissy from Chrissy and Color, and Bran from Bards and Brews, for one session. That was a very interesting game to say the least. very wow, very powerful game.
I don't think I have heard of that one.
Alice is Missing, yeah. It's one of those it's one of those TTRPGs that you don't that is like a one and done kind of a deal, where you pick up the game and you follow along with the instructions of the game. It's supposed to be GM-less, and it only has like a facilitator to be able to like draw the cards and gather everything. But for the most part, like it's pretty much there's no GM that's telling the story. It's the players that are all there that are coming up with everything as they go, and then solving the mystery of why Alice is missing. And it can get pretty dark, I won't lie.
Cool. I'm gonna have to look that one up, and I will include links to that in the show notes for anybody who wants to check it out as well. Do you have any um, like favorite systems that you've done? Do you tend to like fall back to 5th edition, or have you been enjoying branching out and trying other systems?
I've been enjoying branching out to other systems. I think it's healthy, and it's healthy in not being in that same rule set for so long. It's nice to be able to learn how different things operate versus like that one system that you're accustomed to. Just from the standpoint of fifth edition is not a perfect system, and I don't think there is any one system that is. I think there are a lot of different systems I think that a lot of the systems that are out there have like great aspects of it. Like for instance, I'm playing also a Blades in the Dark campaign, and I've been learning a little bit here. I've been learning a lot from that system in how they utilize clocks to be able to see the outcome of certain things. I even adapted that aspect into one of my D&D groups to kind of help them be like, you guys are doing the stealth mission, and I don't think it's necessarily right that one bad roll from one person would botch the entire operation. So why not take the clock, this clock rule, and make that a thing to where like you have this many times to mess up before like the entire area is alerted of your presence.
I think one of the like tenets of this podcast is you should try other games and then steal their mechanics, because many games do certain things really well that other games don't always do really well.
Yeah.
So find the good nuggets that you can take to whatever your system of choice is. And Clocks is a great example. That is such an easy one to port over to basically anything. Well, especially because there's not really a lot of mechanics to it. It's basically just a little circle, and then you just mark off boxes when things happen, and then when you fill a box up, your whatever it was is completed. So, especially for stealth and heist type gameplay, Blades is a great game.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a little bit about some of the tools and stuff that you guys use. Do you want to talk a little bit more about just like what tools you use to run a single session?
So I'll use Owlbear Rodeo to be my virtual tabletop, and I have what is it? I use D&D Beyond for all of my D&D games, just because it's very convenient. I already have like their master subscription, so that way it allows me to like run all these different campaigns and keep everything pretty organized versus having everybody send me PDFs, and I'm like trying to like switch back and forth, from all the different tabs that I have on, from like the different programs. That's just something to make it easier. And then for music, I think I'm glad that Owlbear is experimenting with allowing music from a different web browser. So like I'll put on a YouTube video from that has like the ambiance that I'm wanting for, and then have it streamed through that web app. So that way my players can listen to that as loud or as quietly as they want. I was talking not too long ago with a gentleman on Twitter about the video conferencing site that I use, which is Google Meets. It's I've been using that for a while because initially we were using Discord, but Discord was was being very laggy and not working pretty well with some of my other players. So it was in the middle of the pandemic that I found Google Meet. So we transitioned over there, and we had been playing it ever since. I did have to, when they did revoke the free 24-hour conferencing call that you could do. I did get a subscription because it's Google, and it's been working pretty good. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I may have to pay a little bit, but it's for my players, and I'm more than happy to do and shell out what I need to make sure like our gaming experience continues.
I didn't realize that Owlbear allowed audio now. That must be something new that they've recently added, or I just haven't used them a lot recently. So
I know when I started using it, it had it as an experimental feature. So I used it a couple times, and I think it's like hit or miss, where sometimes it'll work and sometimes it'll be a little wonky. And I think that's why like they're saying it's experimental. It's just to work out all the little bugs out of it.
and you mentioned you use YouTube to find like ambiance clips and stuff. Is that typically where you go to just find whatever you need?
Yeah, because because my games aren't streamed, so it's not an issue of like if this is going to be if I'm having to deal with any sort of copyright issues. So I can pull whatever I need to from YouTube to be able to run and make sure like the music is perfect for my players.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always forget I don't stream games either, so I don't ever really think about copyright or anything like that. But yeah, if you're streaming, you definitely don't want to be just pulling random stuff off of YouTube.
Yeah, and I know from my Descendant to Avernus campaign, I couldn't use. We used the Office theme song as like background music for when I would do the recaps. So I know for a fact like I couldn't do that on a live stream like on Twitch. But for like a personal game, yeah, it's free, you know.
That's awesome. That's a nice touch to the intro of a new session. Um, are there any TTRPGs that you have not gotten to play yet, but you would like to play?
Um, I want to say it's Vampire the Masquerade. I see so many different things. I see um so many different content creators that that show off, you know, some of their VTM OCs and talk about it, that I'm like, it has me intrigued. It's just it's not been up there as far as like one of the things to grab and see about running, but I would definitely love to learn and see how it's ran and see how it's played.
Yeah, that's one that I haven't gotten a chance to play either, but for people that I've talked to that have played it, they tend to really like it. Do you have any house rules that you use in your games?
I have a couple of them. One is for when it comes to combat. I pulled this one from the dungeon coach, and it's called the glancing blow. In that, when it comes to attack rolls and the player meets the armor class of it, instead of fumbling around, it's like if it meets, it beats kind of a deal. It's like, well, let's make it a little bit more fun. You didn't necessarily beat the armor class, which a lot of which I always get the sense like that's what you're supposed to do, not meet it. You know, you roll the number for their armor class, and though you do get the you do get the hit, but it's at half damage, and then you describe the theatrics of, well, you manage to find a small hole and stab right into the enemy's right through the enemy's armor, but it's not enough to where you can feel as though you managed to make all the what you had full impact, but it's enough that, you know, as you pull back, you feel as the blade cuts through skin, kind of a deal. So that's one of the things that I run. In addition to that, I use the Critical Hits Revised PDF that you can find online, which has made crits spicier, especially when it comes to acid damage.
Ooh, spicy acid.
Yeah, my wife was on the bad side of of an acid attack, and her character suffered a pretty bad dose of acid that caused a drop in her charisma. And according to the PDF, it said it can only be fixed with with the use of lesser restoration. So I made sure after, you know, the fight was done, like how she thought, what she thought, how she felt about it, just with the way that the fight had taken place. And then yeah, we had a fun time as they tried their best to find a new a somebody that could give that would be able to cast lesser restoration for her. And she played her character very well as somebody that had been attacked in that way. So that's something that we use too. And then I think those are like the two big ones that we use.
I don't know if I have heard of either of those. I know that I specifically hadn't heard of the glancing blows house rule, but I really like that because I know there was a one shot that I ran a while back, and I kept forgetting the meet or beat on the armor class. So if you just had a specific rule to say, "Oh, this happens," and now narrate it, then I kind of like that as just a way to remember what happens because it's a special condition on you either miss, you glance, or you hit.
Yeah, and it's such a very specific thing. Like I said, the armor class is a set number. So it's in my head, and I agree with the dungeon coach when he said like it just seems lackluster just to say, oh, you meet, you beat, kind of a deal. Well, let's make this a little bit more fun, in that you do the damage still, but you don't do it all the way because you only manage to meet it. So you found that little bit there to be able to do the damage. So, but that, that'll encourage, at least the players in my head to where like, okay, we're trying, we're still doing damage, we're still going through, the fight's still going. And it just kind of, at least to me, it feels like the intensity increases a bit, and it's very fluid as far as like the combat is concerned, because that's the longest part of when it, at least to me, when it comes to D&D, is the combat. So to not have to fight over the ruling on that, just straight, you miss, you glancing blow, or you actually hit, and then you just roll on from there with no issue.
Right. Yeah, I really like that. It makes a lot of sense, and it seems like a simple way to remember what's happening in that scenario. We are getting pretty close to time here, so is there anything else that you want to talk about, or other? If not, you can go right into mentioning your socials.
Okay. I as far as my socials, pretty much you guys can find me on Twitter at the number 4 everdm_Justin. You can also find me on TikTok under the same name. I play Katsu Legatu, a Owlin folk cleric, on the Bards and Brew stream every Wednesday, and every other Monday I play as Elias Night-Ire, the muscle for the group in our Blades in the Dark campaign. And there are a couple other projects coming our way with not only the Bards and Brew crew, but with another group as well. So stay tuned. And then also, I've come up, me and my friend John are starting up a podcast called the Black Dragon Dungeon Company pod, or what you can find us on Twitter at BDDC_pod. We're still working on, at the time of this, we're still working on the audio, and then we hope to be publishing here soon. You can find us publishing our solo TTRPG videos on YouTube under the same name. And we are also publishing different games using the Caltrip core rule set, as well as coming up with different things to add flavor to your D&D game.
Awesome. What if I could just probe real quick on your podcast? What is the what are a typical episode of your podcast? What will that look like?
So an episode will either be one of two things. It's either going to be what we call an encounter episode, where you'll have me and my co-host John taking sides on a topic. For instance, homebrew versus module, and we'll both explain our sides, why I believe modules are better to use. And while John flips over and says like why he thinks homebrew is better, and towards the end of the episode we'll come together, because we both understand like there are pros and cons to each side, so we just have our stances where we believe one is better than the other. And then you'll have another episode that we call our rest episode, our downtime episode, where we'll have a casual conversation about again another topic that we both have our agreement on, we'll both agree on, and we'll just kind of elaborate and kind of come up with ideas on ways that we can make, if it's like a rule, like how we can make this better, or firsthand experiences on a new TTRPG that we've never played before, and our thoughts and opinions on that. And yeah.
Cool. Well, that sounds like a fantastic new podcast. So I will recommend that all of my listeners go check that out when it releases.
That'd be
Awesome.
really appreciated.
So thank you very much, Justin, for joining me today.
Thank you again for having me. It's been a blast.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Dungeon Master's Toolkit podcast. You can find links to all of the products and resources that we talked about on the show in the show notes. And if you'd like to join the community or find out how to be on the show, check out our subreddit or join us in our Discord server.